The moment you hear this story, your heart will lean forward, because something rare is about to unfold in a place the world usually ignores, a place where broken machines and forgotten people live. And before the secret reveals itself, remember to like this video and subscribe to Stories of Kindness, because stories like this deserve to reach every soul. At the far edge of the city, where tall buildings slowly faded into cracked roads, there stood a small mechanic garage made of rusted metal and tired walls. The sign above it had lost half its letters, and most people passed by without even noticing it. Inside this garage worked a young mechanic named Haru. His days were long and silent. He arrived before sunrise and left after darkness settled. His hands were always stained with oil, and his clothes smelled of metal and sweat, but his eyes carried patience, not anger. Life had never been kind to him, yet he never spoke badly about it. He fixed engines with care, as if every vehicle carried a story. Every coin he earned went to food, rent, and sometimes medicine. There was no room for dreams, only survival. That afternoon the street felt unusually quiet. Birds stopped fluttering, and shopkeepers looked up as a black luxury car rolled slowly toward the garage. Its surface shone like a mirror, reflecting a world far richer than this street had ever known. The car stopped, and silence followed. A door opened, and out stepped a billionaire woman known across countries for her sharp mind and colder heart. She wore elegance like armor and authority like breath. Her schedule was packed, her patience thin, and failure unacceptable. Her assistants surrounded her, speaking urgently because the car had stopped working, and no expert could fix it in time. Haru watched from inside the garage, unsure if this moment was real. People like her never came here. She looked around with discomfort, as if the air itself offended her. The assistants hesitated to even step inside the garage. Then Haru wiped his hands slowly and stepped forward. He bowed slightly, not out of fear but respect, and then he spoke in Japanese. His voice was soft, steady, and sincere. The words floated through the air, unfamiliar to everyone except one person. The billionaire woman froze. Her confident posture broke. Her eyes widened and her breath caught, because that language had not touched her ears in decades. It was the language her mother used to speak at night when money was scarce and love was simple, a language tied to warmth, safety, and lullabies she thought she had buried forever. The assistants looked at Haru, confused, some amused, thinking it was nonsense from a poor mechanic, but the woman heard every word. Clearly he asked about the problem. Politely, he welcomed her with humility. He spoke like someone who expected nothing. In return, her heart began to race, not from anger, but from memory. The smell of oil mixed with the echo of her childhood kitchen. The garage blurred, and for a second she was no longer a billionaire. She was a little girl again. Haru stood there, unaware of the storm he had awakened. He only knew he was speaking the language that once saved him too, and in that fragile moment inside a broken garage, two lives stood at the edge of a transformation. Neither of them yet understood. The billionaire woman did not speak for several long seconds. She simply stared at Haru, as if he had reached inside her and touched something she had locked away for years. Her assistant shifted, uncomfortably unsure whether to interrupt or step back. The street outside slowly returned to noise, but inside the garage time felt suspended. Haru noticed her silence and thought he might have offended her. He lowered his gaze respectfully and waited. Finally she spoke to him in Japanese, asking where he learned that language. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the strength she showed the world. Haru looked up, surprised, yet calm, and answered in the same language, saying he learned it from an old man who once lived near the river. He explained that years ago, when Haru was young, hungry, and homeless, that old man had shared his food, his shelter, and his words. The man had been lonely and broken but kind, and he spoke Japanese because it reminded him of his late wife. Haru listened every night, learned every word, and slowly learned the meaning behind them. As Haru spoke, the billionaire woman felt each sentence land deep inside her chest. The accent was imperfect, but the emotion was pure. He spoke of gratitude, of patience, of finding dignity, even when the world offers nothing. She remembered her mother speaking those same ideas in Japanese, while sewing clothes late into the night. Back then, she had been ashamed of their poverty. Now she realized that was the richest time of her life. The assistants watched their boss closely. They had never seen her like this. Her eyes softened, her shoulders dropped, and the sharp edge of authority faded. They could not understand the words, but they understood the change. Haru spoke without fear, without knowing who she truly was to the world. To him, she was simply a person, standing in need of help. The woman asked Haru why he never left this place, why he never chased a bigger life. Haru smiled gently and said that life had already given him enough. He had work, he had purpose, and he had the language that connected him to kindness. He said, chasing wealth often makes people forget who they are. The words were not an accusation, just a truth spoken plainly. Those words struck the billionaire woman harder than any criticism she had ever faced. She had climbed higher than anyone around her, yet felt emptier with every step. She looked around the garage. Again, the cracked floor, the old tools, the quiet dignity, and felt something she had not felt in years: honesty. For the first time in her life, she was not being praised or feared. She was simply being spoken to as a human being, and that realization unsettled her deeply. She realized she did not know how to exist without power, yet here was a poor mechanic, standing steady without any. Haru stepped toward the car and asked permission to examine it. The woman nodded silently, stepping aside as if she were the guest and he the owner. The balance had shifted quietly. The garage no longer felt small. It felt important. As Haru opened the hood and began to work, the billionaire woman remained there, watching, listening, absorbing every word he spoke in Japanese, not because she needed the car fixed, but because something inside her had already begun to repair itself. Haru rolled up his sleeves slowly and leaned over the open hood of the luxury car. His movements were careful, not rushed, not nervous. He treated the machine the same way he treated every broken thing, with patience and respect. The billionaire woman stood a few steps away, watching silently. The assistants wanted to intervene, to offer tools, advice, or authority, but she raised her hand gently, stopping them. For the first time, she wanted no interference. As Haru worked, he continued speaking in Japanese, not to impress, not to perform, but because it was the language his thoughts flowed in. When he focused, he spoke about engines being like people. He said, when something stops working, it is usually because it was ignored for too long. The woman felt those words settle heavily inside her. She had ignored many warning signs in her own life: loneliness, exhaustion, regret. The garage echoed with small metallic sounds as Haru loosened bolts and checked wires. His hands moved with confidence earned through years of struggle, not training schools or certifications. Every scratch on his skin told a story of failure learned and overcome. The billionaire woman noticed his hands more than the car. They were rough yet gentle, powerful yet controlled. She realized that true skill does not announce itself, it simply exists. He spoke about the old man again, saying the man used to tell him that fixing things was a form of kindness because it gave them another chance to serve their purpose. The woman closed her eyes, briefly remembering how her mother used to repair old clothes instead of buying new ones. She remembered being embarrassed back then, wishing for more money, more status. Now those memories burned with regret. One of the assistants whispered that time was running out and meetings were being missed. The woman did not respond. She had missed meetings before and earned more money. She had never before found herself again, and she was not about to walk away now. After a long moment, Haru straightened up and said the problem was not major, just a damaged connection, ignored by those who relied too much on machines and too little on listening. He adjusted a small wire, tightened apart, and wiped his hands. He asked politely for the key. The billionaire woman handed it to him slowly. Her fingers trembled slightly. She did not know why. She had signed contracts worth billions without a second thought, yet this moment felt heavier. Haru turned the key. The engine hesitated, once then roared back to life, strong and steady. The sound filled the garage like a pulse returning to a body. The assistants gasped in relief and surprise. Some smiled, some stared in disbelief. But the woman did not celebrate. She felt tears rise unexpectedly. The sound of the engine felt like a heartbeat. She thought she had lost long ago. Without thinking, she stepped forward and bowed deeply to Haru. The movement was instinctive, not planned. The assistants froze, shocked by the sight of their powerful leader bowing. To a poor mechanic on a broken street, Haru immediately stepped back. Surprised and uncomfortable, he tried to stop her, saying it was not necessary. But she remained bowed for a moment longer, because that bow was not for fixing a car. It was for fixing something inside her that money had failed to heal. She straightened slowly, her eyes wet but clear. She thanked him in Japanese, her voice quiet and sincere. Not as a billionaire, not as a client, but as a person saved, in a way she could not explain. Haru smiled softly and replied that he only did his job. In that small garage among oil stains and silence, a shift occurred. Power changed shape. Wealth lost its weight, and two strangers stood connected not by status or need, but by humanity awakened through a shared language and an honest moment. The engine sound slowly settled into silence, and with it, the heavy moment. Inside the garage deepened. The billionaire woman straightened her posture, but something about her had changed. The sharpness in her eyes was gone, replaced by uncertainty and humility. She looked at Haru, standing there wiping his hands on an old cloth, unaware of the storm he had stirred inside her. She reached into her bag and pulled out a checkbook. The movement was automatic, something she had done thousands of times before. When problems appeared, money usually erased them. She wrote a number without hesitation, an amount large enough to buy the entire street. Several times over, she held it out to Haru and spoke in Japanese, saying, "This is for your skill, your time, and your kindness." Haru looked at the paper, then at her face. He did not rush to take it. He did not even seem tempted. He read the number slowly, then gently pushed the check back toward her. He smiled, not proudly, not rudely, but peacefully. He spoke in Japanese, saying, "Kindness should never be sold, and help should never be weighed in money." The words landed like a quiet earthquake. The billionaire woman felt her breath shorten. No one had ever refused her money before, not politely, not calmly, not without fear. People chased her wealth, flattered her power, and bent under her influence. But this poor mechanic stood firm, without anger, without arrogance. She asked him softly why he would refuse something that could change his life. Haru paused and looked around the garage. He spoke about how this place had given him dignity when he had nothing. He said money could change his comfort, but not his purpose. He said the old man who taught him Japanese also taught him that taking too much can make a person forget gratitude. The woman listened, as if each word stripped away another layer of armor. She realized how many times she had mistaken control for security and wealth for worth. She asked him then what he truly wanted, if not money. Haru thought carefully before answering. He said he wanted the garage repaired properly so it would not collapse in the next storm. He said he wanted tools that worked so young men from the street could learn real skills. He said he wanted opportunities for those who felt invisible. Nothing for himself. He did not mention his hunger, his exhaustion, or his own future. The assistants exchanged glances, unable to hide their shock. They expected negotiations, demands, or fear. They saw none. The billionaire woman felt tears sting her eyes again. This time, she did not fight them. She nodded slowly, understanding that this request carried more weight than any number she had ever written. She told Haru in Japanese that she would do more than he asked, but she would do it his way, quietly, Without names, without praise, Haru bowed his head respectfully, accepting not as charity, but as shared responsibility. In that moment, the power in the room shifted completely. The billionaire woman no longer felt above this place. She felt connected to it. The garage no longer felt like a stop in her schedule. It felt like a turning point in her life. As she prepared to leave, she looked back once more at Haru and said, "Thank you not for the car, but for reminding me who I used to be." Haru replied simply, saying sometimes broken things only need to be listened to. The luxury car drove away, but something far more valuable had been left behind, a promise of change rooted not in money but in humility, compassion, and a choice that would echo far beyond that quiet, broken street weeks. Passed quietly, but change moved quickly. The garage that once leaned under rust and fatigue began to transform, not overnight, not with noise, but with steady care. Workers arrived early each morning, bringing tools, wood paint, and light they did not wear. Logos, or speak loudly, they worked with purpose as if they understood this place. Matted Haru watched from the doorway, unsure at first. If it was real, he had lived too long, without expecting miracles. The old cracked floor was repaired, the leaking roof sealed, the walls cleaned but not erased. The history of struggle remained. Respected new tools were placed carefully, not to replace the old ones, but to stand beside them. Haru ran his hands over them slowly, feeling gratitude rather than ownership. He understood this was not a gift, it was trust. Young men from the street began to gather again as they always had, but now they stayed longer. They watched, learned, and asked questions. Haru welcomed them without judgment. He taught them how to listen to engines, how to feel vibrations, how to understand problems before forcing solutions. He spoke to them about discipline, patience, and pride, and honest work. He did not raise his voice. He did not preach. His life itself taught them. The billionaire woman returned often but quietly. She came alone, dressed simply, parking her car far away and walking the rest of the distance. She stood in the corner, observing, listening, absorbing. She never interrupted, never corrected. She wanted to learn how this place functioned without control. Without her name attached, she felt lighter, freer. She watched Haru teach and realized leadership did not require authority. It required consistency, care, and respect. She noticed how the young men straightened their backs when Haru spoke, how they laughed more, how they stayed. Later, she realized she had spent years managing people who obeyed but never trusted her. Here, trust grew naturally. One evening, she stayed after the others left. She spoke to Haru in Japanese, saying she had started funding shelters, training centers, and repair shops across the city modeled after this garage. No announcements, no headlines. Haru listened quietly, then nodded. Approvingly, he told her that change spreads best when it is not forced. She confessed something. Then she said she had spent her life building walls of success to protect herself from pain, but those walls had also trapped her. She said the garage had taught her how to open a door again. Haru replied that purpose often hides in simple places, waiting to be noticed. The young men began to find jobs. Some stayed to teach others. Some repaired vehicles for people who could not afford help. Word spread quietly, not through media, but through gratitude. The garage became more than a workplace. It became a symbol of dignity. The billionaire woman slowly withdrew from public attention. She stepped down from boards, passed leadership to others, and chose a quieter path. She did not abandon responsibility. She reshaped it. She learned to measure success by impact rather than numbers. Haru never changed his routine. He still arrived before sunrise and left. After dark, he still fixed engines with the same care. But now, when he looked around, he saw futures forming. Instead of fading, he saw confidence replacing fear. He saw himself reflected in others and felt peace. What began as a broken car had repaired a broken system. What began as a shared language had rebuilt a shared humanity, and without seeking recognition. Two lives continued forward forever, change grounded not in wealth or power, but in kindness that chose to grow and spread silently. Through the world years passed, and the city changed in ways most people could not explain. The headlines spoke of markets shifting and leaders rising and falling, but something quieter, more powerful was happening underneath. Streets, once filled with idle frustration, now carried purpose. Workshops, training centers, and small garages appeared across neighborhoods, offering skills, dignity, and direction. People did not know who funded them, and many assumed it was a government plan or a charity network. The truth was far simpler and far more human. The billionaire woman slowly disappeared from public life. Her name stopped appearing in business magazines, and her face vanished from conferences. Some assumed she had retired, others believed she had lost influence. No one imagined she had chosen to step away. She lived more simply now, spending her time visiting places like Haru Garage, sitting quietly, listening more than speaking. She learned to fix small things herself, not because she needed to, but because it reminded her of balance. She often thought about her mother and how life had come full circle. The language she once pushed aside now guided her choices. She spoke Japanese only in moments that mattered to her, moments of honesty, reflection, and gratitude. It became her anchor, a reminder of who she was beneath titles and wealth. Haru continued his work without ever calling himself a hero. He saw the changes around him, but never claimed credit. When people praised him, he redirected it to the young men who now taught others. He believed legacy was something you passed on, not something you owned. The garage remained open to anyone willing to learn, regardless of background or ability. One afternoon, the billionaire woman stood at the doorway, watching a new group of trainees laughing and working together. She felt something she had chased her whole life: contentment. Not loud, not proud, but steady. She realized that success did not come from being understood by millions, but from being meaningful to a few. She thanked Haru again that day for speaking Japanese. In a moment when she needed it most, Haru smiled and replied that sometimes the right words appear when hearts are ready to hear them. They stood there in comfortable silence, two lives forever linked by a choice made in humility. The story of the poor mechanic and the powerful woman spread slowly, not as a legend but as inspiration. People who experienced kindness passed it forward. They did not know the origin, and it did not matter. Kindness had become the message. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that true wealth lives in compassion and courage, then take a moment now to like this video and subscribe to Stories of Kindness, because every story you support helps this message reach someone who needs it today.